let there be no hostility except against the aggressors. فَإِنِ انْتَهَوْا فَلَا عُدْوَانَ إِلَّا عَلَى الظَّالِمِينَ. Then Allah mentions some details. الشهر الحرام بالشهر الحرام والحرمات قصاص فمن اعتدى عليكم فاعتدوا عليه بمثل ما اعتدى عليكم واتقوا الله واعلموا أن الله مع المتقين وأنفقوا في سبيل الله ولا تلقوا بأيديكم إلى التهلكة وأحسنوا إن الله يحب المحسنين. There will be, Allah says, there will be no retaliation in a sacred month, or there will be retaliation in a sacred month for an offense in a sacred month. That basically, if they fight you in the sacred months, so there were 4 sacred months in the lunar calendar, and these were, by the way, a tradition, an Ismail, a tradition from the religion of Ibrahim and Ismail. 4 months where there should be no war, no fighting. These are 4 months of peace. These are 4 months of peace. There is no fighting in them. Even the pagan Arabs used to watch that, by the way. They used to stop. Like if they had a fight, whenever it was the sacred months, they would stop their fights until they are over. So Allah is saying, if they fight you in the sacred months, you fight them back in the sacred months, 1 for 1. Then Allah is saying, and all violations will bring about retaliation. So, again, this is the concept of eye for eye, tooth for tooth, ear for ear. Okay, the concept of justice in Islam. So, if anyone attacks you, retaliate, meaning defend yourself and fight them back in the same manner. But be mindful of Allah and know that Allah is with those that are mindful of Him. So, again, means don't transgress. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving them another instruction: spend in the cause of Allah and do not let your own hands throw you into destruction by withholding, and do good, for Allah certainly loves the good doers. So again, this is a call to spending and a call to preserve your lives. Allah is saying, وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. Do not cause yourself to die. And that means everything, any action that could ultimately lead to your death is prohibited in Islam. So for example, overspeeding when you're driving your car, like you drive your car at a dangerous speed, okay, you are bordering the point of killing yourself. And if it gets dangerous, it becomes haram. If it gets dangerous, it becomes haram. Any lifestyle that jeopardizes your health, that could lead eventually, even over an extended period of time, that could lead to your death, then it becomes haram. And that's, by the way, why the majority of the scholars, they consider smoking to be haram. Why? Because they say, medically speaking, smoking cigarettes increases your chances of getting cancer. So it leads to premature death. So they say, from this verse, وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ, do not bring yourself to death. Do not bring death upon yourselves by your own actions. So that's the verse that they use to make smoking cigarettes haram. Okay, so these are, again, this is the context of Islamic legislation. And I want to clarify things for you guys, because we have to understand. Because there's a lot of debate and there's a lot of speech out there about Islam and accusations against Islam. So they say, for example, Islam spread by the sword, right? And they say when Muslims conquered, like they had Medina, they conquered Mecca, then they took a Ta'if, then the Muslims started spreading Islam by force. Is that true? Is that true? Did Islam spread by the sword? That's what they say. And they say jihad is a holy war. Jihad is a holy war. It's a crusade against all non-Muslims. Is that true? We need to be able to answer. Why? Because there are people who put together some thoughts and they present them in a way that they seem to be academic and they seem to be informed, but the reality is not. Why there is jihad in Islam? Why? 4 reasons. 4 reasons. None of them is to force people into Islam, or to force nations, whether individuals or nations into Islam. First reason for jihad in Islam, for fighting. Why is it permissible in Islam? First, to defend oneself. Allah says, وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ وَلَا تَعْتَدُونَ. Fight those who fight you, and do not transgress. This is called jihad al-daf', jihad of protection, self-protection. And if you can't defend yourself, by the way, you'll be eaten. You'll be eaten. The Arabs say, إِن لَمْ تَكُنْ ذِئْبًا أَكَلَتْكَ الذِّئَابُ. If you are not a wolf, you'll be eaten by the wolves. You have to be strong. That's how the world works, by the way. If you're not strong, okay, you'll be taken out. If you're not strong in school, you'll be bullied. If you're too soft, too gentle, if you cannot stand up for yourself, what happened? You'll be bullied. And bullies, pick their victims. They pick a victim that will not stand up for themselves. So if you are not strong, that's what jihad is. If someone attacks you, you have the right to self-defense. That's the first reason why there is jihad. Number two, again, for you to give an impression of strength, so people don't, like other nations, don't consider attacking you. So you're not sitting ducks. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَعِدُّوا لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ مِنْ قُوَّةٍ وَمِنْ رِبَاطِ الْخَيْلِ تُرْهِبُونَ بِهِ عَدُوَّ اللَّهِ وَعَدُوَّكُمْ. Prepare for them everything within your capacity from equipment and power in order to strike fear in the hearts of your enemies so they do not attack you. Again, because when you are weak, people will take advantage of you. You have to be strong. That's number two. Number three, to remove oppression. To remove oppression. So if there is a Muslim government, there's a Muslim country that is strong and has the means, and it sees injustice, like the masses of the people are going under oppression, they're taken advantage of, they are persecuted, they're treated unfairly, and these people, these populations seek the help of the Muslims are supposed to help them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ الَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا أَخْرِجْنَا مِنْ هَذِهِ الْقَرْيَةِ الظَّالِمِ أَهْلُهَا وَاجْعَلْ لَنَا مِنْ لَدُنْكَ وَلِيًّا وَاجْعَلْ لَنَا مِنْ لَدُنْكَ نَصِيرًا. Allah says, O you believers, why don't you fight for the sake of Allah when there are people who are oppressed? The men who are oppressed, the women who are oppressed, the children who are oppressed, who turn to Allah and they say, Oh Allah, rescue us, save us from these oppressors, the government that are oppressing people. So if there are people who are oppressed, populations that are oppressed, and they are seeking the help of the Muslims are supposed to help them if they are able to. That's number three. And if you look around, by the way, if you look around at the history of Islam, when Islam started dominating the Arabian Peninsula, who was around the Muslims? The Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire. They were dominating what? They were dominating Bilad al-Sham, natural Syria, which is today Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. These are Arab lands. They had the Ghassaniyin, the Ghassasina. They had the Arab tribes, and these tribes were oppressed by the Byzantines. And the Byzantines ruled over Egypt. And they were abusing the Egyptians. They were enslaving them. Anyone who reads in history, what used to happen, by the way, in Europe in general, do you know that there was two main castes? There was the nobles, the landlords. These people owned huge pieces of land and all property, and the rest of the population, which is the majority, were pretty much like slaves. They used to work day and night and work hard just to survive, work for these landlords. And they had no rights to own, no rights to have a property, nothing. So they were oppressed, they were worked day and night in order to survive. And if they could not work, they were left to starve to death with their families. That was in the Byzantine Empire. In the Persian Empire, it was even worse. There were heavy taxation, by the way, in the Byzantine Empire. So all these populations were oppressed. And the Persian Empire has already ruled over Asia Minor and Iraq. Iraq was mainly Arab population. They were enslaved by these people. So now these people, Islam went to them. Why? To liberate them, to give them justice, to free them. And that's why most of these populations, by the way, none of them was forced into Islam. When Islam came and it took away the oppression of the Persians and the Byzantines, the majority of these people, they chose Islam because they saw the justice themselves. So that's reason number 3, which is removing oppression when it's thrown on the masses and these masses ask for the help of the Muslims. Number 4. What is number 4? The number 4 why there is jihad in Islam, because Islam sees that it's the birthright of every human being. It's the birthright of every human being to find and to hear the true message of Islam. Everyone has the right to that, by the way. Everyone has the right to that. And if any country opens its borders, Muslims can come, talk about Islam, preach Islam, no issue. No way, you can't fight with this country. You can't fight with this country. So say if the Persian Empire said Muslims can come in, okay, we allow Muslims to come in, they want to preach their religion, your religion. There would be no need to fight against them. And if they were not oppressing their people, there would be no need to fight with them. Do you know if a Muslim went into the Persian borders or the Byzantine borders and they preached Islam and they were caught by the authorities, do you know what would happen to them? They would be killed. Why? Because that would be considered an ideological attack against the authority of the government. So how are you going to carry Islam to the population, to the masses, when the governments do not allow any kind of invitation, any kind of propagation of Islam in their territories? They hijack people's rights to hear the truth. So that's why the Muslim armies have to be there. If the Muslims are allowed to preach, that's it, no need. But if the government says no, we have authority over these people, we're not going to allow anyone to preach anything to them. Islam says no, you don't have this right over people. You don't have the right to prevent people from hearing the truth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here we're going to deal with you. And so these are the 4 reasons, by the way. These are the 4 reasons. None of them is to force Islam on anyone. And if you look at the history of Islam, the lands that Islam opened, the majority of them, the Muslims, were welcomed by the population. And you will find for long periods of time, by the way, the populations kept their own religion. They were not forced to change their religion. Egypt has a big population of Christians. So it's been dominated by Muslims for 1400 years. If people were forced out of their religion into Islam, there would be Muslims now. There would be Muslims. Iraq has a big Christian population, by the way. Egypt, by the way, had a Jewish population as well. Do you know that? It's only in the late or in the mid 20th century that actually the Jews left Egypt and they went to settle in Palestine now. Iraq has a big, huge Christian population called the Assyrians. The Assyrians, still until today. Until today. They have their religion and they speak their language. A big population. They were not forced into Islam. Asham, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, they have a big Christian population. They have a big Christian population. Why didn't these people why were not these people forced into Islam if Islam spread by the sword? Umar ibn Khattab, when the Muslims opened Jerusalem, Al-Quds, he gave an agreement that the Christians and the Jews have the right to worship as they wish. So there's no jihad to force Islam down the throat. Islam did not spread by the sword at all. There's no way this could happen. If this happens, it's anti-Islamic. It's against Islam automatically. It's not something that is supported by Islam. Is that clear? Is that clear, guys? So know that very well. Anyone who tells you, oh, Islam spread by the sword, and here is the verse of the sword, chapter number 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, right? Verse number 191, here it is. Tell them, okay, just read the verse before it. There's a context. Don't take verses out of context. You have to understand that. Because, I'll tell you how something spreads by the sword. Look into the history of Spain. The Inquisition in Spain. At some point in time, the majority of the population of Spain was what? Muslim, right? When the Spanish took over Spain and they kicked out the Muslims, they initiated the Inquisition. I know Spain was full of mainly Muslims, Christians, and Jews. When the Crusaders, Spanish Crusaders, took over Spain and they kicked out the Muslim authorities, what did they do? They started persecuting Muslims and Jews, torturing them in the worst examples in human history of torture. Something unheard. They're called the Inquisition, guys. Look it up. The Inquisition. Look it up. And thus, in a few decades, there was no Muslims left, no Jews left in Spain at all. At all. That's what you call when something spreads by the sword. When you force your ideology on a population. Did the Muslims do that? No. No. They don't do that. And if someone did that in the name of Islam, it's against Islam. Okay. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're going to conclude soon inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now, we said this whole context is about Islamic legislation. So Allah is telling us how worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifests itself in acts of worship, in transactions, and even when it comes to matters to warfare. And even as well now Allah is going to talk about Hajj, one of the pillars of Islam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Hajj, which is verse number 196. Allah says, وَأَتِمُّوا الْحَجَّ وَالْعُمْرَةَ لِلَّهِ فَإِنْ أُحْصِرْتُمْ فَمَا اسْتَيْسَرَ مِنَ الْهَدْيِ وَلَا تَحْلِقُوا رُؤُوسَكُمْ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ الْهَدْيُ مَحِلَّهُ فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ بِهِ أَذًى مِنْ رَأْسِهِ فَفِدْيَةٌ مِنْ صِيَامٍ أَوْ صَدَقَةٍ أَوْ نُسُكٍ فإذا أمنتم فمن تمتع بالحج إلى العمرة فما استيسر من الهدي فمن لم يجد فصيام 3 أيام في الحج و7 إذا رجعتم تلك 10 كاملة ذلك لمن لم يكن أهله حاضر المسجد الحرام واتقوا الله واعلموا أن الله شديد العقاب. I will read the English meanings so we can move through it quickly, because really we don't need to get into the details of Hajj, but we just know the context now. We know why Allah is talking about Hajj in Surah Al-Baqarah, and we're coming to by the way, almost halfway through Surah Al-Baqarah. So Allah is saying complete the pilgrimage and minor pilgrimage for Allah, but if prevented from proceeding, then offer whatever sacrificial animals you can afford, and do not shave your heads until the sacrificial animals reach their destination. But if any of you is ill or has scalp ailment,